On this podcast, we have a tradition of asking every guest 3 books that they read that influenced their lives or changed their perceptions about the world. So, over to you. What are 3 books that you read that made you see the world differently and you think young aspiring entrepreneurs should probably read, or young people, or anyone for that matter?
So I'm embarrassed to say I don't read much. When I was younger, though, and when I was a young entrepreneur, I read quite a lot. But my memory is weak. So okay. 2 are coming to mind, and hopefully a third will come. The one that I think had a real impact on me in terms of the way I think about the ways to solve difficult problems with people, not people who are battling, like how do you solve difficult things, was something called the Medici effect. And it's a book about, so the Medici family in Italy, I don't know when, it's probably maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Anyway, they were patrons of the arts. And what they would do is they would invite different artists to come and, I don't know where it was, but I think maybe live at their house or something, for a period. But the idea was they would invite different kinds of artists, and they would force those 2 different kinds of artists to co-create something. So like you would get an oil painter and like a sculptor of metal or something, and they would have to come up with something together or be in the same space. And I think, I don't know if it's true, but I think it's the book that made me hungry for and curious for diversity in my life. So I work at African Leadership Academy, probably the most diverse square kilometer of real estate in Africa. If you take, how many different nationalities are there and the kinds of interests people have, right? From an African perspective.
It's like 54 countries, yeah?
Well,
Represented?
in any given year, it's about 40 in any given year. But 40 African countries plus a smattering of international people. And when different skills and ideas collide, it's really amazing. So it's also about what happens if you come in with a different skill set. So I arrived at ALA and I came from a technology and a media background, but I came to a school. There was a whole bunch of stuff that was really easy for me because I'd been doing it for a long time. It's like being an oil painter. You just know how to paint with oil, right?
Yeah.
And now there's this guy who's battling to change the color of his metal. And you just understand color and paint in a way that the guy who's the metal sculptor doesn't know how to do. So it's like this is easy.
Yeah,
I'm
this
just
is
gonna
easy.
do this, right? So as an example, when I came to ALA and there was all sorts of stuff wrong with the IT network, I was like, but this is easy. This is what you just do this, and we can have it a better place. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. So, and I think that kind of diversity we have to encourage. And I think entrepreneurs who seek it will be more successful. So that's book 1. The Medici effect. And I think we have to be careful about homogeneity of ideas. Like, I think you've got to seek diversity in your life. It's probably my biggest lesson for anyone. Seek diversity in your life, you'll be a better human. And then the second book is more around like how to run a company well. And it's called The Rockefeller Habits. It's a really short book. And basically talks about how to set up meetings and rhythms in a way that keeps everybody moving. It's like super practical. And I deployed that in my company when I was about 26. I read this book. I was like, okay, we're all going to do it. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And it was really interesting. It just made everything kind of hum. It's got nothing to do with like Slack or Teams. It's like none of that stuff, right? It's actually
Zoom.
It's got nothing to do with technology. It's all about habits. Right. It's probably one of those early precursors to all these books about habits now, but it's about the habits of a company and how to build that in a way that works for growth. And I found that really helpful as someone who didn't know what to do. And I didn't have a board or anything like that to tell me, or advisors and mentors in that way. So that was that book. And the last one, for me, is it's actually not about a book. I read good journalism. I think I think long form news, people who don't just write the news like that's breaking news, like knowing something happened. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about good analysis of things that come out regularly. So instead of reading the daily internet, find a weekly or monthly publication whose editor you think is kind of cool. You know, when they interpret the world for you. So I have a couple of publications where I consume them very regularly with a lot of vigor because I think they do the work for me in terms of everything that's gone on in the world. But the most important things for you to know this week, if you care about either this geography or this issue, I think you got to find your editor, which is generally a publication, but you know, and I think if you pick them, it's really helpful as an entrepreneur because you got to know about the world, and it's a really good way to do it. So those are my three.
So do you mind sharing any of the editors that you like or you read most of their work?
Yeah. So it's more publications. So yeah, I think I've always been largely a fan of The Economist. It's super dense, but I find their sort of synthesis of the world pretty good. And then I would say someone else who I've always enjoyed is Fareed Zakaria on CNN. I don't know if you've ever seen his weekly stuff. So he produces something called GPS every week, and it's a political analysis of the world. But I've always enjoyed his perspective, and I feel like, okay, yeah, there's stuff about like geopolitics that I would never have interpreted or thought of, and it's like a crash course, like, oh, that's what's happening between like China and everybody, or those sorts of things. So yeah, I think maybe the point about those are global perspectives, which I think you've got to have an understanding of what's happening globally. And then just choose news sources that are different to you. So I very intentionally watch Al Jazeera, no other news channel, because it's the only one that I feel is like it's the least biased of all the westernized opinion. It's still westernized to some degree, Al Jazeera in English, because of some things. But like I just find it so healthy to kind of go, oh, actually, if you're not completely kind of westernized, like this is a viewpoint that's a bit more. So I think you must choose carefully, and those are my choices.
Well, thank you for sharing them. And well, I hope people can start reading too, right? Because nowadays, Instagram captions are better than, a long article or a long a long article, a long publication that someone wrote probably, I don't know, on Medium or, any other channel, right? Because, it's hard for people to concentrate nowadays. And it's like you want things summarized to like 5 lines, and that's the whole news for us.